In the 2 decades following the end of World War II, Africa was in flux. Many countries became independent, but in some places, new dictatorial rulers replaced colonial powers like France, Belgium, Italy, and Britain. With this came violence and conflict, which led to forced displacement. It has never ceased. But not long after the Organization for African Unity was founded in 1963 in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, Africa's leaders addressed the fact that the landmark UN Refugee Convention of 1951, which was aimed at post-war Europe, did not apply on the continent. They decided to draft their own regional treaty, one that would make international refugee law applicable in Africa. Adopted on September 10, 1969, the Organization for African Unity Refugee Convention, governing the specific aspects of refugee problems in Africa, has since provided refugee protection to millions of Africans who would not otherwise have been recognized as refugees. As its official title acknowledges, the convention addresses specific aspects of the situation in Africa, including by supporting regional collaboration and facilitating voluntary repatriation. In 2019, Africa celebrated the 50th anniversary of the adoption of the 1969 OAU Refugee Convention. The African Union, established in 2002 as successor to the OAU, organized a series of meetings and activities to commemorate this milestone, as well as the 10th anniversary of the adoption of the second groundbreaking treaty on forced displacement, the AU's Convention for the Protection and Assistance of Internally Displaced Persons in Africa, better known as the Kampala Convention. This was adopted in the Ugandan capital in October 2009. These activities, organized with supports from UNHCR, the UN Refugee Agency, and other partners, were convened under the umbrella of the AU's widely welcomed theme of 2019, the Year of Refugees, Returnees, and Internally Displaced Persons, towards durable solutions to forced displacement in Africa. Over the past half-century, millions of men, women, and children have been forced to leave their homes in search of protection. The conventions have helped provide this in Africa, the continent most affected by forced displacement, with more than 7 million refugees and almost 18 million internally displaced at the start of 2019. Most have fled conflict, which is often at the root of forced displacement. New challenges have arisen in the second decade of the 20th century, with conflicts springing up in the Middle East, Africa, South America, and elsewhere. But amid this deteriorating situation, many veteran African leaders hailed the importance and achievements of the treaties, particularly the 1969 OAU Refugee Convention.
Over the past 5 decades, the convention has made it possible for millions of Africans to reach safety and receive protection and assistance. Its importance and vitality remain undiminished today.
The conventions are very important for Africa to ensure that the continent has the necessary legal and other instruments to handle the issue of refugees and displacement.
They are echoed by leaders of the UNHCR and of the African Union, guardian of the conventions. UN High Commissioner for Refugees Filippo Grandi notes the generosity of Africa while stressing the relevance of the conventions in the continent.
It is very topical, it is very current even today, where a lot of the displacement is caused by wars that tend to last for many years, tend to repeat themselves, start again, even when they finish, and tend to be regional in nature. So these conventions that give obligations to the state that subscribe to them are extremely useful and relevant today.
While the 1951 UN Refugee Convention remains the bedrock of international protection for refugees, the 1969 OAU Refugee Convention was ultimately conceived to address different problems that were emerging in Africa, including people fleeing apartheid, minority rule, and conflicts that follow colonial rule. As more and more people were forced to flee their homes across Africa, it became clear that action by governments was essential. The pioneering 1969 OAU Refugee Convention was the first binding, regional legal instrument on refugee issues. It also expanded the definition of refugee, bringing protection to millions more.
African leaders came up and said, okay, fine, let's come up with our own convention, trying to take into consideration the unique African situation, the problems that we are now facing on a day-to-day basis.
There are actually 5 drafts. The process of drafting it started in 1964. And to understand why the OAU decided to draft an African refugee instrument, you really have to know a key fact about the 1951 convention, which is the UN refugee instrument. And that is that when the 1951 convention was originally drafted, the original treaty says that it does not apply to people in flight from events after the 1st of January 1951. So in the early 1960s in Africa, you had people in flight from the struggle against colonial rule, but the 1951 convention did not apply to these people because they were fleeing events that had happened after the 1st of January 1951. So the OAU saw a problem. We have all these refugees, but we don't have an instrument that we can use to offer them refugee status in another country. So the OAU decided in 1964 that it should have its own refugee instrument for Africa that would allow one African country to provide refugee protection to someone in flight from another African country.
The 1969 OAU treaty that emerged complemented the 1951 convention and its 1967 protocol, which eliminated geographic and time restrictions of the 1951 treaty. These restrictions were principal factors behind the OAU's decision to create its own refugee treaty. There was no such protection in Africa for people who fled to safety within their homeland. The guiding principles on internal displacement was the nearest thing until the Kampala Convention was adopted by the AU in 2009. It was the world's first and remains its only legally binding instrument to address internal displacement. It deals with displacement generated by factors such as conflict, natural disasters, and climate change. It is a model for other regions to follow. The conventions have been life-saving and have given hope to millions that they can rebuild their lives.
فطبعا الاتفاقيتين دول كان لهم تأثير كبير جدا في اكتساب اللاجئين حقوق معينة.
The 1969 OAU Refugee Convention has been widely ratified and domesticated and has informed the development of progressive national laws. The younger Kampala Convention needs more attention. Of the 55 AU member states, 47 have acceded to the 1969 OAU Refugee Convention and 30 to the Kampala Convention. The conventions have affected the daily lives of people, providing opportunity, education, work, and hope. Mauritanian refugee Hajirato Issaou fled Senegal when she was an infant. Now in her 30s, she helps other refugees as a UN volunteer. She took part in UNHCR's DAFI program, which has helped thousands gain higher education since its launch with German support in 1992.
Ma famille, je crois que je suis la première personne qui a fait les études poussées, d'avoir le bac plus 5. Si ce n'était pas ce programme DAFI, est-ce que moi je serais là? Je n'en pense pas. Financièrement, la situation de ma famille ne me permet pas.
In Liberia, Ivorian refugee Irene demonstrates the importance of self-reliance and livelihoods for the forcibly displaced. She fled Côte d'Ivoire in 2002 after being attacked and shot by the men who killed her father. She was pregnant at the time, but she and her child survived. With UNHCR support, Irene opened a sewing and tailoring center in Liberia to teach others like her a new skill.
Training more women, laborer women, refugee women, and today they're able to take care of their family. What I'm trying to say to the women, don't be discouraged in life. I'm proud of myself, and I'm proud of also them.
The AU's theme of the year has also spread awareness about the forcibly displaced, including the 2 conventions. The theme's official champion, President Teodoro Obiang Nguema Mabasongo of Equatorial Guinea, has visited refugees in Ethiopia and Uganda, donated funds for education in camps, and addressed a commemorative meeting on the 1969 OAU Refugee Convention. Those benefiting from the 2 conventions have in this decade been facing an increasingly hostile environment and declining levels of assistance. The AU's theme of the year activities, including continental consultative meetings, dialogues with displaced populations, and capacity building initiatives, have helped focus attention on this and other challenges. In addition, host countries often see refugees as a security threat, while xenophobia is another obstacle, including in some places that previously welcomed refugees. The large scale of displacement in Africa is a major challenge. Nobel Peace Laureate, former refugee, and 2-term president of Liberia, Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, says the situation of displaced women should be given particular emphasis. For her, the AU theme and the Global Compact on Refugees are vital to find solutions.
The challenge is to ensure the political will for all member states to continue to demonstrate to work for peace and to formulate and implement programs that promote the objectives of the 2019 theme.
Sirleaf, the first elected female head of state in Africa, has been a totemic figure for all women in Africa, including refugees and internally displaced persons, whose voices are becoming louder and more demanding, including in African peace processes.
When you look at the role of women in building stable societies, they are not just victims of the conflict, but they are very important stakeholders in the peace-building process. It's for us to realize and to recognize that we have a responsibility to build peace on our continent. Anybody else who helps us is assisting us. The first move, the main impetus, is on ourselves to be able to do that.
Tita's thoughts are echoed by Benita Deu, the AU Special Envoy on Women, Peace and Security. She points out the important role that women refugees play.
Significant that women should lead in the camp. Distribution of the food, distribution of water. So they should be promoting their leadership in the camps.
Some prominent African figures stress the importance of enhancing partnerships and solidarity to ensure the conventions work better and to find durable solutions.
Those 2 conventions are complete. What remains is for the African leaders to implement. That's all. Because they are quite comprehensive. They're quite comprehensive. They have clear clarity of definition, clarity of vision, and what needs to be done, so on. So my humble advice is for the leaders now to make sure that those 2 conventions are implemented to the letter and spirit, and if that is done well, we would be able to prevent problems of refugees and IDPs probably before they happen, and when they occur, we'll be able to respond or manage the problems better.
Ahmed Aboul Reit, the Secretary General of the Arab League, stresses burden sharing and working together. He says improving conditions within societies is the key to decreasing the stress of forced displacement.
الدول العربية تمثل معبر للمواطن الإفريقي، إما بهدف الإقامة أو بهدف العبور إلى مناطق أخرى، لكي ننظم هذه الأوضاع ونؤمن الحد الأدنى من مصالح اللاجئين والنازحين. يجب التعاون العربي الإفريقي في هذا الصدد، والعربي الإفريقي الأوروبي والعربي الإفريقي الدولي.
Meanwhile, the conventions will continue to play a vital role in the years and decades ahead, Forcible displacement will not disappear, but the search for durable solutions will continue, and the displaced should stay strong.
To the refugees and those many millions displaced in various parts of Africa, don't lose hope. Don't lose hope. There is light at the end of the tunnel.